Somebody asked me, so what's going to happen in 2012? And my immediate off-the-cuff response was nothing. Which I probably should have modified to not much more than what's happening now. As soon as people hear a date, we get fixed on that date. You know, December the 21st, 2012. It's like, come that day, everything's going to happen. That's going to be the time when the great transformation, renewal, collapse of everything, whatever it is, it's going to be on that day. I don't think much is going to happen on that day. There may be some, celebrations at holy sites around the world where people are gathering to celebrate the solstice of 2012 and waiting for the end of the world to happen. I'd actually looked to be even more precise. When is the solstice? It's actually at 11:11, which is something that probably happens once in every 1,000, 1,500 years. The solstice is actually on that time, 11:11. So all those people who are so caught up in 11:11 are going to have a whale of a time. The solstice of 2012 is on 11:11. Hey, couldn't be much better than that. And maybe that's just part of the wonderful cosmic choreography. I think that whoever organises this whole show is having a wonderful little laugh to itself about what's going on. And I was thinking the actual date, if you write the date out, it's 1-2-2-1-1-2-1-1-1-1. And it's like, nice. It's not just some random string of numbers. I love that stuff. Being a mathematician originally, I love playing with numbers and seeing patterns in numbers. Not to read any great significance into it, except there's a subtle beauty, there's a game going on there underneath, which is nice to enjoy. And there may even be people going to be sitting around waiting for 11 minutes past 11 on the 21st for the moment to happen. And I think that moment will pass unnoticed, or even the year. It's not about a moment in time, it's about the period of time. The sun crossing the centre of the galaxy, the solstice. That's the point when the centre of the sun crosses the centre of the galaxy. But there's a period of 36 years when the sun is crossing the centre of the galaxy. And we're in that period now. I don't think the Mayan calendar was saying at that particular day, it ran its full circle. And as it came to an end, we're entering these times. Probably a period more like 100-year. If you take a 100-year period, I just think it's interesting to take a 100-year period. Then 50 years ago would have been 62, the beginning of the 60s. And that really was the beginning of a whole movement towards renewal. That was when the large proportion of the population in the West began to see that the old way of running society, the old politics, the old way of interacting didn't work, and something new needed to happen. And there was that vision which came in the 60s. And interestingly, psychedelics have been part of a theme here, both in terms of the indigenous cultures who saw these things in people's experiences. It clearly was fueled by psychedelics, the 60s. People were stepping out of their ordinary reality, tasting other realities. And if it hadn't been for that widespread use of psychedelics, maybe that vision would not have happened, or it would have been much more muted. Something happened then. It ended with the Beatles singing, "All You Need Is Love." And that's the vision. It's true, it's still true. All you need is love. If we could just live with love in our hearts as a permanent reality, 24 hours a day, we wouldn't be in this mess. If we were all living with love in our hearts, we'd be treating each other very, very differently. We'd be treating other peoples very, very differently. We'd be treating the environment totally differently. And so that was the vision. And since then, it's like, how do we do that? That's the challenge. How do we actually live with love in our hearts? And that's the spiritual journey. For me, 2012 is like the epicenter of the cultural earthquake. And the closer we get to that time, the more the crisis is going to deepen, and also the push towards change, transformation is going to increase, that pressure is going to increase. We're getting closer and closer to the epicenter of the change. And as we move beyond the epicenter, that change is going to keep reverberating. That's how I see 2012 as a period in history with no discrete boundaries, but something we are clearly heading into. We are in a period of crisis. Clearly, we all see that. There's numerous international conferences looking at different aspects of it, whether it's the global warming or resources or deforestation, pollution, water. It's been a long time coming. And I think many of us have been aware that it's going to hit us sooner or later. Even with the economic banking crisis we're with at the moment, people are acting with total surprise on television. Oh, the system's flawed. Wow. Any economic system that's based on the charging of interest has to collapse eventually. It's been obvious it's coming. Finally, we're here, or this phase of it is here. And the same thing with energy, oil. I think it's been coming really for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. I think this is its destiny of humanity, to come to this point in time where it has to wake up and make a shift in consciousness. Economic crisis is probably the first crisis that has really made it clear that it's something in our own thinking, in our own society, that's actually creating the problem. Or we could always put it out there, well, hurricanes, they're going to happen anyway, and global warming, we don't know. We can push it away, all the other things. Wars, we can always blame the other people. They're at fault, we had to go and defend ourselves, or whatever it is. But this, the economic crisis, is fascinating because it's clearly coming from the greed, the short-sightedness, the self-centeredness of people in our own culture. Of course, we can say it's them. But it's coming home. It's something in our consciousness. That's the root of the problem. I think that's going to get clearer and clearer and clearer. And as it does, it's going to push us more and more into this thing of how do we actually shift consciousness? How do we step out of that old way of thinking? And I think that's what these spiritual traditions have been about over the years, really for thousands of years. There have been people who, in one way or another, through grace, good teaching, traumatic experiences, or wonderful, blissful experiences, one way or another, they've stepped outside of that normal, self-centered, ego-dominated way of functioning into what I call natural mind. The mind that's uncluttered by the fears, the wanting, the hoping, all that stuff. That's the direction I think we have to move. And it's happening. It's coming sort of behind the crisis, but it's growing in our culture, I think, since the 60s. That's when we started taking a new look at spirituality. Spirituality, for me, is that awakening to the true reality, the true nature of our mind, which happens in those mystical experiences. And spiritual growth is about how do we integrate that other reality into this life. Waking up, becoming, quote, enlightened, whatever we want to call it, isn't the end. Beyond that is seeing through the illusion of space, time and matter. Seeing through the illusion that we are material beings. The transcendence of this physical world. And thinking, well, how would that look collectively? And the image I have is that humanity is like points of light in space. And these points of light have been, over time, growing in numbers, this population explosion, but also each of those points of light getting brighter. And as we get brighter, also the boundaries between them beginning to dissolve until we just become one single light, a planetary awakening of human consciousness. The phrase that comes up is a collective near-death experience, but it isn't a near-death experience, it's a collective rebirth, collectively reborn, and that our whole history has been building up to this point. Beyond that, we become something totally different form of existence. I probably see that as where we are headed. The question is, do we get there this time? A minor setback would be the collapse of Western civilization. It'd be major for us, but all civilizations have collapsed. Greeks, the Romans, Chinese dynasties, they all come to an end. There's no reason to think that Western civilization is the one that's going to last forever. In fact, there's every reason to see it cannot go on. Maybe we're living through the falling apart of Western civilization. But that doesn't mean the end of humanity. It doesn't even mean the end of us. There'd be a period of who knows what, maybe chaos and regrouping. But a lot of the technology we have would still be there, a lot of the knowledge would still be there. We'd continue and we'd start accelerating again. Even if we had such a major setback that humanity became extinct, there's evolution, million years time, 10 million years time, other species will evolve, intelligence will keep evolving, something we can't imagine what. Whether we reach it this time or another time, whether that one collapses, whether we do, I think is really up to us. We collectively have the choice about what happens at this particular time in history.